Some,
here, here. Thank you.
some, it's in health, you see is your kids that were testing, doing their part. They were testing their kids.
We wouldn't do that at school.
Maybe,
That's
yeah.
what they said. Or-
Is that the bell to start already?
How many people are you expecting?
I'm not sure. Okay. All right.
Here they come.
There's no tiptoeing this one. There's no tiptoeing.
I'm gonna, some of you I know have already been in, so I'm gonna, there's a sign-in sheet that's going around. Make sure you sign that. So, sorry, I don't have any goodies or any candy or anything like that. That's the way it goes, you know?
They said all the money went to the sped department.
What's that?
They said all the money went to the sped department.
Hey, we didn't have money for goodies, not my goodies. So we're going to talk about special ed processes, and my name is George McGee. For those of you that I don't know or not sure who I am, one of the special coordinators. Real quick, so we're going to talk about service levels, basic superintendent service levels, eligibility, and how you get into special education, become SPED, talk about some parent letters that you might receive at your schools for requests for evaluations. And then we'll talk about some of our satellite sites, or actually all of our satellite sites that we have here in the district. I'll give you a handout on that. And so what I hope is that once you move on to the next section, and usually that you kind of have either, I don't know everybody's level of understanding of special ed and where you're at, but just kind of another basic understanding of some of these concepts, some things about our service, our satellite sites, and so that you can just go back to your staff and help support them and through us if you need our assistance in facilitating what goes on within your special ed department and support for your students out there. I'm going to start off here with the video. I think it's kind of funny. And it's, this guy is playing Hitler. He's talking to the German army or soldiers, and they're talking about placement of a student. And so they're speaking German over here, and then they just have the words pop up on the screen. So you got to read really fast if you want to keep up. But it's about 3 minutes, so kind of start with that. Just kind of, so, you may not say that in staffing, but somewhere somebody probably is thinking, wanted to say that. I mean, some of that stuff probably does happen, I'm sure. But I thought it was just kind of funny. If you've been in special ed for a while, and I think you can show those kind of things. So hopefully it didn't offend anyone. So the process is, again, we'll talk about special ed eligibility, service levels, satellite sites, and parent letters. So special ed eligibility, okay, real basic, okay, two-prong eligibility analysis. Okay, in order to be eligible for special ed, you have to have one of the 13 identifiable disabilities, right, in IDEA. In New Mexico, we have 14, which is, anybody know? Developmentally delayed. Okay, so in New Mexico we have 14, other states they have 14 as well, but the federal government recognizes really 13. And then once you have one of these identified disabilities and you're eligible for that, then we have to show the second prong is that you actually need special education. Okay, because we have tons of kids probably out there that have disabilities but aren't receiving special ed services because they don't need the support or the related services. And that's all great. These are the 13 disabilities. And then New Mexico, of course, we also use developmental delayed. And that's only for ages 3 to 9. Right before the child turns 9, we have to evaluate, and if they don't meet one of these other disabilities, then we have to exit the child from special education. And most of our kids a lot of our kids coming from DD pre and stuff, you'll see this eligibility DD. And it'll identify, let me hand out sorry about that, the PowerPoint. It'll Just want to take one and just pass it. It'll identify like either developmentally delayed in social, social, emotional, physical, communication instead of maybe speech, language, emotionally disturbed, things of that nature. Because of course you guys know we don't want to identify as the 3-year-old as ED. I mean, you know, you start talking about stigmas and things of that nature, and the little kid is 3, he has no idea what's going on. And so a lot of times when we're not sure, we give them that DD label, provide support services, and hopefully things turn around and we don't have to actually test for provide a psych test and give them an ED label. But that's only from ages 3 to 9. Okay. And then of course, any kind of services for special ed always starts with the evaluation. Okay, so we must do that. That's the very first piece. So 2-prong eligibility analysis must be met in order to provide special ed services. You must have one of the 13 disabilities, or in Mexico the 14th, which is DD. And it all starts with the evaluation. Okay. And so when we're talking, if you guys have questions or you want to make a comment, just feel free. There's not going to be like a specific question answer type. If you have something to say, you want to say something, please feel free. Just go ahead and shout it out, and we'll talk about it. All right, service levels. Okay. So service levels, what is that? Okay, and why is it important? So the basic reason service level is important in the IEP is for funding. That's where we get our funding from. When we take the 80th day count and 120th day count, that's when we get an average as far as our count. And we look at service levels in the IEP that's actually finalized and archived and in the system as completed. And that's going to determine the funding that we're going to receive for that child for the following school year. It's important because on the 80th day count, they may be a B level. And then for whatever reason, we go into the next semester, they have different classes at a middle school or high school or elementary, they're doing something different, and the kid moves up to a C level, okay? We want to make sure we capture that C level on the 120th day count so that we get the correct funding for that child. And still, it's my understanding that if you're planning on moving a kid from an A to a B or a B to a C or C to a D, that you want to have some kind of coordinator involved in that discussion, whether it's a staffing, and in that way they give the okay as to, you know what, yeah, we can see why you're moving them up a level before you have that IEP. So make sure we continue to do that. And then when you think about service level basically is placement, but it's not talking about placement in a location, that's setting. So when we talk about service level, we're talking about the placement on the continuum of services like general ed, and then general ed with support, general ed with pull-out, homebound, residential treatment, self-contained, all that's placement along that continuum of services, okay? It's not location because the setting is location. So when we send kids to Crossroads, that's a setting, okay? That's not a placement. The services they receive there are their placement on that continuum as far as the alternative setting. So that's kind of difficult sometimes to understand because of the word placement. We think it's a place. Here's the different service levels that we're all familiar with. Minimum, moderate, extensive, maximum A, B, C, and D. And it all depends on the amount of time that they're receiving special ed support or related services. Real basically, that's it. And there's something here, fair isn't everybody getting the same. Fair isn't everybody getting the same thing. Fair is everybody getting what they need in order to be successful. So that's what we do here. What is it that they need? And then the student, along with us as parents for our students, whether they're special ed or regular ed, receiving services, we all have to do our part in order to be successful. It's not just giving you what you need and then you're going to be successful. So we all have to do our part. But we do what we need to for the kid, give them the opportunity at least. So in summary, for service levels, it impacts funding, that's the big one. It's talking about time, not location. And then we have the 4 different service levels. Questions on that? That's first 2 are real basic SPED 101 type stuff, just kind of. All right, satellite sites. what are they, where are they? Why can we do that as far as establishing those sites? And how do you, entry exit criteria for the sites? So I'm gonna give you a list, and this list is only as good as yesterday. It has yesterday's date, because there are changes always, right? So you're gonna see that there's some to be hired, to be determined, whatever, acronym you wanna replace there. So when you look at this, look at your schools, and I don't know, hopefully you're not surprised that, hey, I didn't know that was at my school, Or maybe you have something else at your school that's, and you could have something else happening at your school that's not on this list because it's not considered a district satellite site or satellite program. Okay, because sometimes administrators, you guys do that. You say, hey, I'm gonna create this within my own building, and you do that on your own to house your kids. But those are all the satellite sites, the programs district-wide as of right now. Like I said, they can always change. Right now, there are 71 district-wide, okay? And that includes, I think it's 31 that we have in DD-Pre. I work with the DD-Pre and the AU programs. And so, but 71, I don't know how that compares with other districts around the state. We are the second, third largest district in the state. But I can tell you that, like autism, we have 6 DD-Pre autism sites, classroom specific, and then we have 9 elementary K-5 autism sites district-wide. Albuquerque, as far as I understand, they don't have autism classrooms. They're autistic, the students on the spectrum, they attend and stay at their home school, which is great, right? Everybody, hey, we keep the kid at the home school with his peers, all that kind of stuff in the neighborhood. But then with that comes the negative of that, in which they've had a lot of concerns with restraints and a lot of concerns with isolation or seclusion, because it's rough. We have some of the kids on the spectrum that are out there in the regular ed and at your campus and are doing well, but we have those that, they just need a different type of methodology, a different type of intervention that we can't provide in a regular or even a special education pull-out classroom. And so that's the good thing that we've done, is we've created some of these sites. Now, on the bad side, right, there's always the good and the bad. Even with us, we had 7, we created 2 more for this coming year, and we're already at capacity pretty much with those 2 new sites. And at capacity, because we try and staff those at like a 41 ratio, and we have basically a teacher and 2 EAs, so you can almost have 12 kids in there. But 12 kids, that's quite a bit. And so right now we have about 8 to 7 in each classroom, and that's quite a bit. So we're not full, but if we build another one, they will come, and we will put them in there, right? That's kind of, and that's one of the things that we want to get away from, is that just because a kid is identified as being autistic, that doesn't mean that the kid now is going to a site. So start getting that out of our heads, if that's kind of thinking that maybe we've had in the past. Doesn't mean that. Now, when I left 5 years ago, in our DD-Pre program at the time, there was about like 20 kids that were on the spectrum, 25 kids. This year, we're close to 50. And I can tell you already right now in Child Find, right now in the summer, that we're doing evaluations and we're testing and things of that nature from the early intervention agencies. We probably have about 5 kids right now that are coming up to DD-Pre that are going to be identified as AU. And since I've been back since March, those 5 plus, we've probably received about another 5 from out of state that are coming here for next semester. So that's 10 just in the last 2 months, 3 months that I've just been back. So it's, we have about 320 district-wide that are on the spectrum, which is a huge jump from when I left back, in 2012. And so, it's at 100% of increase just at the DD-Pre level in those 5 years. And so, it's been good that we've developed some sites, because some of those kids do need that, and I think it has helped. We have low incidence, which can be autism as well, but we have our medically fragile, or multiply disabled. We have our BICS program, we have our ED, and then we have our 18 to 21-year-old programs. So we have quite a bit of services along the continuum. At the middle school and high school, it's a lot easier within a school building to do that because the number of staff you have, the number, you know what I mean, you're able to kind of offer the whole continuum of services other than, and you can also do this too, other than like say the Crossroads, because you can choose to keep your kids at the middle schools or at the high schools. I mean, you could say we're going to draw alternative here at the high school, but we send them to Crossroads. So at the elementary, it's a lot different. You know, sometimes elementary schools only have 3 staff members, 4 staff members for the entire special ed, and then we get a kid who's medically fragile, and we're not going to provide a medically fragile classroom for one student. I mean, that's just cost-wise, it's not effective. So this regulation here, and I'll hand it out as well, and it's just, you know, we're not going to go over it, but just so you have a copy of it. That's the regulation that allows us to go ahead and, you know, come up with satellite programs or different programs at different locations in order to support students. Because like I said, you know, it doesn't make sense for us to have a medically fragile classroom at every elementary school, you know, financial wise. So, does the student have the right to placement in a neighborhood school? No, he doesn't. Okay? As close as possible is what the regulation says. Okay, so yes, we always want to look at the home school. Those are where the peers are at, all that kind of stuff. Lives down the street and just, you know, hop, skip, and a jump over here and they're here. But we need to look at what's right and appropriate for the child. Where are they going to receive their best services? I know we've had some schools that have said, hey, you know what, we're going to do it, we're going to try it. The parents have been adamant, and you got to weigh all that as well, you know, and you do as best as you can, but then after a while, I mean, you know, the kid's is in the most restrictive environment at that point. And, you know, we do what we need to do for the kid, so we move them to a different place, a different site, where they can get the supports that they need. And so that's what, this regulation here is what supports that we're able to do that. Especially at the elementaries, and like I said, because they're not able to offer the continuum services within their schools. So how do you get into these sites? There's not a set of guidelines for every site. The only 2 sites that there are some kind of guidelines are BICS, and in BICS there's a flow chart, and I'll hand you that later. And then you have to have the exceptionality of ED in order to get into the BICS program. And then our autistic sites, you have to obviously be autistic, you have the AU disability. Other than that, there's nothing really that says this is how you get into low incidence at Oñate High School or low incidence at Valley View. We're going to look at the IEP, at the kid. What does the kid need? What services are available at his current school? Can we do that? Is there space available? And we can use financial reasons. You know, we can say, you know what, it's just not cost effective. That school already has the bathroom facilities, the staff is trained, the nursing staff is trained, they have the equipment they need. You know, we're not going to bring all that to one school for one kid. So we can utilize that as a, you know, it's a reason why we do that. So nothing specific. I mean, it's all based on the student need and what we got going on. And a lot of times, you guys at the schools, I mean, you're trying different things and trying to help the kid. And once you decide, man, you know what, it's just, you don't know what to do anymore. You know, that's when coordinator gets involved, and then we say, okay, what are we looking at? We start going out to other schools and seeing, because we have to also look at, is this school full? Is this school full? They're already full. Man, you know, we're going to bus the kid from over here all the way to clear across town. Man, that kid's getting on the bus at 6 in the morning. We have little DD pre kids that get on buses at 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, to get to school at 7:30, 3 years old. That's, you know, they probably sleep the whole morning in DD pre, you know, because it's tough.
That's what I was gonna ask, then the district would be required to provide transportation for them
yeah.
at that point.
Exactly. Anytime we place a kid, we're gonna provide transportation. And it's the same thing with, if the parent says, I ain't going over there, I wanna go over here. Well, I mean, you know, if you wanna go over there, you can go over there, but we're not gonna provide transportation. And you need to go ask the principal, hey, do you accept my transfer? The principal can say yes, no, just like any other kid. Once they're doing it on their own, they fall under all those regulations of they're asking for a transfer. If I go to Mike and say, hey, Mike, you know what? Then we're placing them, we are the district, we're all doing that together, and we're gonna provide transportation. But if they say, nah, I don't wanna go to Mike, I wanna go over your daddy.
So I'm assuming deaf ed too?
Yeah, because we have programs right for deaf ed, right?
And when we are the schools.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there, I want to go to Massachusetts, they
Yeah.
can go, but we don't
They can go,
provide.
yeah, we won't provide transportation. Yeah.
Or service?
Not the services probably that they're gonna get at Oñate. I mean, because and that's why we have like, we have kind of like that feeder, like, Camino, and then Desert Hills, Camino, and then Oñate, it's all, I mean, that way. And it's easier because we don't have a lot of interpreters, right? And so the interpreters, I mean, it's easier for them to travel from Desert Hills to Camino to Oñate. I mean, you know, it's still some time, but it's easier to go from there than Cruces High and everywhere else, so, yeah, if they say, you know,
But the interpreter will go with them.
it's going to be hard. I mean, I'm not going to say they're not, I mean, but it's, yeah, I mean, of course, we're not, those are hard questions, because, right, we're not going to let the kid just kind of, hey, you know, but that's why it's our job to really like work with the parents and say, hey, you know what, this is where, you know, where our programs are at. And we started that at the DD Pre, because we have that, the New Mexico School for the Deaf at Mesilla Elementary. And those people that, the staff that works there, they're not LCPS employees, we just help provide them the location. But those kids, then they go to Desert Hills, and then those, you know what I mean? So we're working on them from when they're little, and the parents are saying, hey, this is where our programs are at, and trying to explain to them that this is where it's at, you know, this is where your kid's gonna get the support, you know, and, yeah, we won't provide the transportation. And we get a lot of that in DD Pre, especially daycares, and I wanna go here and I wanna go there, and it's like, you know, we can't be busing all over town. So exit criteria, how do kids exit from these satellite programs? Again, there's not a definitive list of factors. It's all gonna be based on what the kid needs, how the kid's doing. In BICS, there is a level system that they go by. But even that, it doesn't mean that the kid is in all general ed. I mean, the kid may be self-contained in BICS, and he's ready to get out, you know, because he's able to go to all specials, lunch, recess, but still needs the pull out for reading and writing. And we can do that anywhere, in any elementary school. So, you know, we try and send them back. We want to send them back. And as far as one thing that we're going to start doing next year with our autistic kids, or students on the spectrum, is that anytime we get a kid that goes to a satellite site for AU, say we have a kid that goes from I don't know, Mesilla Park to Mesilla. The Mesilla Park staff is going to continue to be invited to IEPs at the Mesilla school with the AU program. You know, if they can make it, great. If they can't, you know, I mean, they won't make it, but invited to IEP meetings, staffings, because that kid still belongs to them. The idea is that, you know what, we are working with that kid at this site to get him ready and hopefully back into your school site with the supports there that you can provide. So that way there's that continuous, hey, you know what, this is our kid still. We're not forgetting you, we know what's going on. So when we do get ready to send them back, that staff member can go to the administrator and say, hey, you know what, I've been at these staffings, I've seen the progress the kids made, we're ready to bring them back. And everybody's on the same page instead of, you know, in May, we're calling and saying, hey, you send somebody, we're sending this kid back. And you're like, wow, we weren't expecting that. So that's what we want to do at our elementaries. If the kid winds up staying there, you know, kinder, first, second, went into the third. Sometimes the principal administrators just say, you know what, parents, I want them to stay here till 5th grade. The principal says, you know what, great, you've been here for 3 years, we'll keep you. And if that's the case, you know, we can do the whole pull out of that school. We can do that as well. So, so that's kind of the idea as to what we want to do with our AU programs, so everybody's on the same page. Questions on that? the exit criteria, so. Any questions on the satellite sites? Anybody have questions about their schools? Might not be able to answer it, but hey, I can write it down and ask and say, hey, you know, they said they didn't have this there. Okay. So in summary, 71 district-wide satellite sites, no definitive entry-exit criteria, IEP-based decision, that's the regulation that allows us to do this. And our goal is to educate students to non-disabled peers to the maximum extent. Because we always remember, you know, I know, and it's hard, and somebody was saying in the last group that it's hard to change your kind of thinking of how you envision things at your school sometimes, right? With, man, you know, we're going to full inclusion. We're not going to have no self-contained, we're going full inclusion. Well, great, but one size doesn't fit all. And that is probably the most restrictive environment for some of your kids. And if they're failing and having discipline issues and problems, it may be because they're, you know, heck, man, Johnny can't do that. And so we've got to be real careful when we start, you know, it's great, but all the general ed sometimes is not the best for some of our kids. So it goes the other way, it's the most restrictive. So just be real careful. And I can, like at Doña Ana this year, I think Miss Love, she got an additional teacher. And so it's not going to be a district site, but she's going to utilize that other teacher, from my understanding, to create like kind of cross-categorical, low-incident type program to keep her students there instead of sending her students out. You know, so that's what she's choosing to do at her school. And a lot of times at the elementaries and not all schools, it's the decision of the administration along with the staff and the needs of the kids that you guys say, hey, this year we're doing this, next year I've got to change it up because we got so many kids, so we're going to do this. So yeah, and I can never tell you, we probably need another DD3 site somewhere in central town area, because we're full already. We're already, you know, we're already having to move kids from out of their home, kind of close to the home school, to other schools already, and it gets tough for the little ones, but maybe we make it happen. All right, how many of you have received a letter from a parent saying that they want their child tested this past year? Anybody get letters? So a lot of people in the other groups were saying that the majority of letters that they received were asking for what kind of testing? AES gifted, right? I mean, you hardly see any letters from parents who are saying, my kid's ED, I need you to test them, my kid's SLD. You get those very few, but Sam was saying, our diagnostic supervisor, was saying that from his count, it's like 90% of the letters that came in were for AES. And so those kids probably aren't even on your radar. They're probably not even in SAT. You have no paperwork on them. Parent just shows up one day and says, I want my kid tested. So once the parent hands you that letter, they've basically informed you in writing and kind of given you consent other than informed consent, because we haven't given them their rights, that they want to test it, and that timeline starts, the 60-day timeline starts. So what we've come up with is, we have a couple of methods that we want you guys to utilize in order for us to get this done. The preferred method is that once a parent comes to you, that you tell a parent, hey, oh, great, can you take that letter to central office, to the special department, and give it to the diagnostician supervisor, right? Most parents are going to be like, cool, I'll go over there. I mean, I'm going to central office. They're going to get it done right away, right? So that's what we want. That way you guys don't have anything to do with that other than we're going to, and maybe not even in this case, I don't think, because we're going to have it set up at the assessment center. I believe there's probably a way to do the vision and hearing. I haven't talked to Sam how he's going to do that, but that just kind of, you know what, they go to central office, they take it, they stamp it, give them copies, and then we put them in the queue and start and get them tested.
So I think the way Sam said is that we needed to make sure vision and hearing was done at the school.
Okay.
And then we send them with the letter. My only concern with this is, so the timeline starts. If we haven't started the SAT process, it's going to be sent back to us to put the kid into SAT. And we only have 60 days?
Yeah, for the most part, for these right here, I can, and I don't know if Sam said anything different, so maybe I'm stepping on myself. But once a parent has said, I want my kid tested, I mean, we're testing them. It's like, they're not even, we're not gonna send them back to you and say, you know what, put them in SAT. We're gonna test them.
But what he
We're gonna
did say
test
was that that letter wasn't, that we should stop advising parents that that'll speed it up, because it won't.
Yeah,
But what you're saying is it will,
No,
because
no.
then they skip that whole SAT process.
well, it won't speed it up as hard because what we do with, a lot of the evaluations that they asked for were gifted, right, this year? And so we're still going to test the kids that are being evaluated for an actual disability. So it's not gonna push back that, you know what I mean? It's not gonna push back, it's gonna, and it's not gonna speed up their process of getting their kid tested because, you know, we still got these kids over here that actually went through, you know, the SAT, through RTI, and they have some disability concerns. We're gonna get those kids tested first and test this gifted student when we can, within that 60-day time limit as well, because they do fall under that 60-day time limit in our district. Federally, gifted evals don't fall under that time limit, but 6-7 years ago, our district put into practice that it would fall under that time limit. So, we did that to ourselves, as far as putting that burden on our diags.
And I think the other thing that Sam was saying was that, they will test the kiddo. The parent does the letter, they'll test the kiddo, but if the kid hasn't been through the SAT process, it's more than likely that they're gonna say there's not enough information for me to even see the diags. The
Because,
evaluator's gonna say, I need them, and then they'll put them back into the SAT process.
and I believe that's because, did you say something about dual discrepancy model?
No, he
And I believe because that has to do with one of the models that we use for testing. And part of that dual discrepancy model, in order for us to actually say the kid qualifies, we're talking about a disability, not necessarily gifted, is that we have to have that data. We have to have that data, and if we don't have that, we can't say that they have a disability, is my understanding from that dual discrepancy. And I think that dual discrepancy is the one that we use for K, first, second, and third. And so we'll probably, we'll do the testing, and we'll say, hey, you know what, this is what we're missing, and then we probably will shoot those back to the SAT and tell the parent, you know what, they need to go through RTI to get some interventions and look at that data, and then we could retest if we need to. But for the most part, for the gifted, I mean, you're not gonna have any SAT packet or SAT interventions, I mean, and even with those, with the gifted ones, we may test and say, you know what, they're not gifted, they're bright, pretty smart, they're not gifted, and the parent's gonna say, I disagree, and then we're gonna say, okay, we'll offer you an independent eval, they can accept it, and we'll pay for that, and it's with one of our contracted people. That may come back and say they're not gifted, and then we'll tell parents, they're not, even through ours, they will disagree with that, and they'll go out and get their own, and they'll pay for that, bring it back, and if it says they're gifted, then we just consider that. We don't have to accept it, we consider it, and even that may come back and it's missing components that we require from testing, that we're gonna tell a parent, hey, you know what, we'll accept A, B, C, and D, but we don't see E, and we have to do that before we actually accept this. And we do that even with an autism evaluation that we just got from UNM. We've accepted almost all of it, except for it didn't have any academic achievement testing. And that's the biggest thing is, okay, they're autistic, but how's it impacting them in their academics? So we're gonna ask the parent, we need permission to do the speech and academic achievement in order for us to actually say, yeah, we'll accept that evaluation, and we put it all together. So if the parents, can't come downtown for whatever reason, central office, we're gonna ask that administration, date stamp that letter, provide the parent a copy, put one in the student file, and then provide a copy to whichever school evaluator is there, because I know some of you are gonna have diags based on the assessment center that we're doing. The diags will be at the school, so if you have a school psychologist there, an SLP, just that someone has a copy of it in case it gets lost. And then that you forward that directly to Sam at central office. And then right there, my cut says, I would say, as soon as you know you're sending that to central office, ask the nurse, hey, you know what, can you get to this kid and do the vision and hearing, so that once we get it over there, we're gonna be asking for the vision and hearing, and we can get that from you guys. And then we'll work with the parents down at central office, and it takes that burden off of, that I gave it to Alicia, she put it in her backpack, and then 2 months later, the parents asking, hey, so what happened to my testing? Well, and she's like, oh shoot, I forgot, it's somewhere in my car, right? And then now the parents mad at her, or, Mike had it at, Vista, and shoot, and so now at least it's us. You know, they can come down and say, you haven't done this yet. Yeah, we haven't, and, right? Ask your teachers to refrain from accepting letters, you know, just let them know, you know, if you get something from a parent, have them come to the office. Even in the email, they send the parent, you know, sometimes we communicate with email with families, the parent says, hey, I want my kid tested, blah, 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 blah. Have them print that, bring it down to your administrator, they stamp it, call the parent, say, hey, we've got this, we're sending it down to central office, because that's in writing as well. And that really pertains to any letters that you guys may get. You know, if you're not sure, get with you, and especially at the elementaries, our new title was gonna be, right? SSSA, asses, or something like that, right? Backwards, right? So, we'll be at the schools, and if, say I'm at, one of the schools that I'll be at is Highland, if I'm there and a parent shows up and they do all that, they can just hand that to me and I'll take it down to central office when I go down later on in the day. So, or if I'm there, they can say, hey, go talk to George, okay, and then I'll take care of that, you know, there at the school. Concerns with some of the letters, that 6-day time limit starts basically, you know, once you give them actual, and then when they come down to central office, we can actually give them that informed consent, what that means. I mean, and then that timeline starts, that's a concern. Another concern is we're not sure what errors are, you know, are concerned, are there for the child. I mean, they just come and brought us a letter and we're like, nobody knows what's going on. And so we're like, okay, well, we'll test, I'm not sure what's going on. And then we ask the question, has this response to intervention been initiated? A lot of times maybe it hasn't, you know, and if we get that letter for that SLD kid or an ED kid or whatever, you know, other than gifted, we'll test, we'll let you know, and you might want to start a SAT packet, you know, with whatever information you have, and then, because if they don't qualify, we're going to send them back to you, and you're going to have an evaluation that's going to give you additional information that you can utilize with your SAT in providing interventions, and then we just kind of continue to go through the process.
And I guess that's my concern, because the SAT process isn't a 60-day process. What they want you to do is do interventions for a 9-week period, and then try some more for a 9-week period, and then you can assess. But, so that's, you're looking at 18 weeks, that's way beyond the 60-day timeline.
And I think this right here, right, when you don't get very many of these, I want to say, but once you get that have been in SAT for 8 weeks, 16 weeks, a whole year, is when the parent is kind of like, my kid's nothing's happening, I'm still seeing the same thing, and then they start talking to other people that say, you know what, or some of the issues that I think that we've been seeing is teachers are saying, write a letter and go take it to the SAT, or go take it to the administrator, and that's how you're gonna get your kid tested, right? Which, that's not what we want, you know, because, I mean, the kid may be making progress, but it may not be the progress that the parent wants to see. And so whenever we do get these letters here, we're gonna test, even though they've been in, you know, the parents, like, they've been in SAT for a year and a half. I don't see anything, here's a letter, test them, you know, and.
One of the problems, I think, is for the secondary level, the SAT process does not work well at those levels.
Yeah.
It needs to be revamped for middle school, high school, because when they get to us, I mean, we know there's a problem like right now, okay? And we don't have time to spend 9 weeks to put in interventions to see if it's gonna change, you know? We need something more that works a little bit faster.
And you're right, because, I mean, once we get to, especially to the high school, right? You're talking credits. I mean, you don't have time to do 9-week, 18-week interventions. You've lost a semester, you're now graduating in 4 more years. You know what I mean? You don't have your credits probably. So, no, you're right. I mean, and that's why when we see like a lot of, I don't know how many SAT packets we get at the high schools, you know, and how, but we probably shouldn't see a lot, you know what I mean? Because a lot of it should be already coming from the elementary. At the middle school, you might see a little bit more, but by the high school, it should already be like, but yeah, no, there's gotta be something streamlined, because I agree, I've always thought the same thing you said, Dan, is that once you get to the high school, I mean, we don't have time to be intervention, or what kind of word is that? Intervening. Intervention.
What we see a lot of, on the same boat as the middle school levels, we have a lot of kids that come in and dip in,
academic improvement plans, or APES, or whatever, APES, whatever you wanna call it, contracts. They've been in them in kinder, first, second, third grade, or it's third, fourth, fifth, and it's like, why won't they ever refer to the SAT team? And I'll be honest, I'll tell you right now, if I see a kid that's been in that situation and they come to me in 6th or 7th grade and they're still struggling, I'm gonna tell the parents to write a letter.
Yeah.
Because my thing is, we've already failed them as a district. They've been in an academic improvement plan for 3, 4, or 5 years, and still nothing's been done about it.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I'll tell you right now, I will tell the
Yeah.
parent, hey, you know what, we need to test your kid.
Well, I mean, because that's a good point. I mean, too, because if you've got a kid that's on a 8 or whatever you want to call it, right? But there's never been any
Yeah.
documented
They've
intervention.
struggled every year, but we haven't
Then,
moved forward.
you know, I mean, we're already moving up to the 6th grade, 7th grade, and it's starting to move fast, kiddo.
Yes.
If you don't make it by 9th grade, you're gonna be done.
See, and I think that's part of the problem at the elementary level is that we put kids on APES and they make improvement, but we don't have a guide as to how much improvement is adequate improvement. Then we close out the APE, we don't refer them to SAT, so it's an evolving circle, and then the next year it starts over, because now the ante's gone up, and they start over, so.
I think the ones I see are the ones that bounce from school to school.
Okay.
So just as the SAP process gets started, they'll move to a different school, but the paperwork doesn't follow. And so then it takes a while for you at your school to identify, hey, this kid's struggling, I need to get them on a SAT, and just as you're trying to get that started, they may move schools again. And so I think that happens in elementary sometimes too, where kids are just, they move, it's so mobile.
Did Carlos say, I went to that SAT meeting that they had a while back. They said something about that, I heard say something about they were working on those kind of kids that are kind of like moving around, so that if they do move, that she's able to track it and then say, hey, you know what, this kid was SAT over here, here's the packet, because yeah, we don't want to lose them in that shuffle either, you know? Yeah, and special ed, it's, you know, when we talk to parents about progress, it's a lot easier for us, I guess, because we're going off of goals. And so we can show, you know, that, yeah, they're making that progress. It may not be this much, but it's this much, where it's harder if they're just on APES or on the SAT. You know, the parent doesn't want to see, because they're like, they don't have a disability, so it's at least they don't, you know, at least especially they might think, okay, well, at least I know George has a learning disability, so I can kind of understand why my son is struggling. But if they're in the SAT and they just have those APES, what's it called, correct?
Yeah.
The parent is like, well, you know, you're not telling me anything wrong with my kid other than he's not making progress, so why isn't he making progress? So I can see how it's harder for you guys if they're not being referred and they're not testing in, you know, in that case, I mean, I would probably do the same thing. You might have to edit this too, Jeff, but that Fred said, you know, I mean, if I get a kid too, I mean, you know, and he hasn't been through SAT or anything, I'm thinking, you know what, man, something's wrong here. Go write a letter, man. You know, because you said maybe we've already put him through 6 years of school, and, you know, at least maybe we could have a diagnosis of something. I don't know. You know?
Well, and sometimes they make recommendations on there, like to have a speech screening done, or you know, go ahead and proceed, and then it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they either move
See,
up from
and
grade
most
to
of our-
6 or something, and it's not, that's
And
hard.
it's hard, because a lot of our parents, I think, sometimes don't follow the process.
Mhm.
And so, you know, they're like, okay, speech testing, right, you guys can take care of it. Right? You know, they trust that and then we don't do it. And then 2 years down the road, somebody's like, did you ever test for speech? Oh, I thought you guys were. Oh, okay, we'll do it now.
I think
Oh,
you
okay.
also misunderstand what that
So-
testing means. I had two this year. Well, they were tested in elementary school. For what? I don't know. They were just tested.
Yeah.
So we had to start the process.
And that's the whole informed consenting that we want to tell parents, because believe it or not, even at DD Pre, we tell parents, like right now, we're telling them, look, you know what, it's an eligibility-based program. You have to qualify based on having a disability. Once you qualify, we put you in. I said, but we're testing you again before you go to kinder. If you don't meet the qualification or have an, have a disability going into kinder, because most of them don't, we're gonna exit you. You're gonna be done with DD Pre, you're done, which is a celebration. And they don't understand that too, so they're like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, well, you know, we're gonna test you again, and if you don't have a speech need, then we're gonna exit you, and you go on to regular kindergarten with no services. Yeah, so, and we just had a parent who's actually in special ed in another district, a diagnostician at one of our DD Pre meetings the other day, and she was nervous and was lost. Because why? It's her kid. It's different when we're on the other side. You know, we do this all the time, but when I'm at that meeting as a parent with my kid, everything we know about special ed and whatever, we forget, and we're lost.
Super as a parent
You
that
know?
has all that background knowledge,
Exactly.
a parent that doesn't have anything, because STEM
Exactly.
has its own language, it really
Exactly.
does, it has so many acronyms, so many, like you said, even the simple word is placement can, you know,
Yeah.
be confused, so,
Yeah.
you know, it is really.
Yeah, it's scary.
It's important to be aware of that more in those meetings, to make sure making it as parent friendly as possible.
That's scary.
So on the previous letter, the very last statement, I think this is where I'm getting confused. Receiving parental consent for evaluation, that's permission to test. And we keep saying 60 days from when the parent says, I want my kid tested, so which one is
Because
it?
that basically starts the timeline, right? Because they've given us consent, they're saying, here you go, I'm telling you. I want
Don't you
test
still have to sign another paper
Yeah.
that gives you consent?
Yeah, so there's another paper that we have, because that's informed consent. We then bring the parent in and say, okay, here's your procedural guidelines or safeguards, and then we're gonna ask you, do you understand what you're asking for? Sign here.
So
Yeah,
then
we
it's
need
informed consent, because I agree with you, I'm still confused.
Yeah, I'm
So is
confused,
it
so-
informed consent or the letter, that's
Well,
something still.
Okay, so
Yeah, that's where
so that's why we're saying that,
Maybe we should ask
because it
that.
kind of starts when we give you the letter, right? 'Cause they're giving you consent to test. But the rule says informed consent, so that's why we want to have them come down to us right away, so that we can give them that informed consent. This is what you're asking for, this is what it means, and then we have them sign that day.
But you're saying the clock starts when they give us the letter. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
pretty much, not as fast as possible to us, so we can give them the informed consent and kind of, you might have a few days.
That's assuming
I
you
mean-
go directly down to you and don't have it off to get tested, right?
Yeah. They're gonna bring it to us. Yeah. Yeah, there's that little lag. I'm like,
Okay,
it's kind of like George.
I'm gonna keep it.
Yeah.
You're gonna get some, you know,
If the meetings are reset,
This is up for bids.
Just like wherever going.
do not know, because I know everybody,
Go, thank you.
It's not as good as, our, both of them.